If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Almitra Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Back when I was in grade school, many of my teachers would tell me that I was going to have to be a doctor when I grew up. Now, sure, they thought I was brilliant, but that's not why they said it. They said that to me because my handwriting was absolutely atrocious. Hey there, Equity Warriors. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the 3E podcast focused on the intersection of education and politics. You know what happens at the beginning of every year? New legislation, all that stuff that our state governments put into place last year, what they voted on. It all starts January 1. And while you might be thinking, what does politics have to do with handwriting? Handwriting should be apolitical, right? Think again. Cursive is making a comeback. And as of January 1st, California, one of my favorite states when we're talking about education, California has a new law that makes it mandatory for every single student in elementary school to receive instruction in cursive handwriting. Now, in 2023, New Hampshire passed a very similar law. And according to mycursive.com, there are now 23 states that have a law or a state standard that requires cursive instruction. I love it. Now, I also found out as I was hunting around for more information on this topic that there are another 5 to 7 states where bills are stalled in their state house or state senate. For example, in Indiana, you have a state senator, Gene Leasing, who has put forward a bill every single year for the last 12 years. 12 years. This state senator has been trying to get cursive handwriting to become the law in the state of Indiana. And every year for the last 12 years, her bill has been killed by the Indiana House Education Committee. What's up with that, Indiana? Not far away in Michigan, we have State Representative Brenda Carter, who has now for 3 years tried to get a law to have mandatory cursive handwriting instruction in grade school. And every year, it doesn't go anywhere. And so you got to ask, or I have to ask, why? What is the deal with teaching handwriting? So for history's sake, cursive handwriting has been taught in U.S. schools since around 1850. In fact, back in 1850, the only thing you wrote was in cursive. But when did that die? When did we stop teaching handwriting? Many of us may remember practicing our letters when we were in grade school, or maybe it was your children. You remember that. I know that as a parent, my own kids, my Gen Z I have a millennial and a zillennial, a cusp child. They were taught handwriting starting in kindergarten. They were taught Danielian handwriting, and then they transitioned to Danielian cursive handwriting in about 3rd grade. And I had this huge concern because my son is left-handed. And if you've ever watched a left-hander write, oftentimes they turn the page funny, their hand is curved over, their arm is curved over on the page funny in order to keep from smearing the ink and so that they can see what they're writing. But my children, they both had the same kindergarten teacher, even though they were 5 years apart. Amazing, amazing kindergarten teacher. And she taught handwriting, truly taught it. And so she taught my left-handed son to make some minor modifications, writing on the back sides of a page in a spiral-bound notebook so that his arm wasn't bothered or his hand wasn't bothered by that metal spiral. She taught him to hold his pencil like a right-hander. Teaching handwriting. Teaching makes a difference. But anyhow, I digress. So when did this cursive handwriting die? The 2010s. What happened in the 2010s? Common Core. Now, Common Core makes no mention of cursive. All that they say in the Common Core is that by 1st grade, students should be able to print all their upper and lower case letters. Now, it didn't just miraculously or instantly go away. It just sort of started to slowly disappear. You didn't see that cursive handwriting or handwriting instruction even in schools after they adopted the Common Core, although there were some English language arts curricula, commercial curricula that continued to support it. You would see it in there, but if the time was not provided to give the instruction, it was one of those things that went by the wayside. Now, there were some schools, especially your public charter schools and some magnets that were focused on skills-based instruction, they continued to teach it. Now, backers of the Common Core state standards, when asked, hey, what's the deal with handwriting? They said that it was more important to have technology and keyboarding because those were more essential skills in the modern world. And while that may be true, there are documents that existed a long time before our modern era, and those things did not miraculously get transcribed into a digital print. One of the things that I've been doing is tracing my genealogy, and I've been at this task for over 20 years now. But one of the things I've had to do is to read the old census forms, and they are tedious and time-consuming, and they're all written in cursive handwriting because that really is the only thing that existed. But in addition to, or besides my own personal quest for reading old census forms to find out my ancestry, you have historical documents, you have primary sources, our Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, all of those old forms, the Federalist Papers, all of those things were written in manuscript, in handwriting. And if we want our students to be able to engage with primary sources, we need them to be able to see the sources in their original form. We often use the term, people will say, put your John Hancock here. And we kind of understand, or most of us understand, that is just another way to say, put your signature here. But why John Hancock? If you never look at the Declaration of Independence in its original form, you don't know that John Hancock wrote his name like 5 times larger than everyone else. It stood out. And so the image of that signature with all the other signatures on the page is something that is impressive. But if you don't read the actual print, the handwritten, the manuscript, the cursive handwriting that's there, you don't get that same understanding of a John Hancock. So historical documents. Well, hey, I'm not going to be a history major. What do I care? Well, let's say you work in a company, or you might come to work for a company or an agency that has to work with documents that are held at the court. Maybe it's old wills, surveyor's maps, land transfer documents. All of those old documents were handwritten. And believe it or not, we sometimes still need to go back and reference those things, especially when there are disputes or legal concerns. But just imagine a society that is cursive illiterate, a society that lacks the skill of signing their own name, because you don't sign your name in print. Although we are not that far removed from a time where illiteracy was much more widespread and people could not sign their names, so they would mark their signature with an X. Before we can write in cursive, we also have to be able to read in cursive. And this is just a matter of the science of reading. We know that the ability to fluently read precedes the ability to fluently, or the ability to decode, I'll put it in proper scientific term, our ability to decode happens about 2 years before our ability to encode at the same level and with the same rate of fluency. It's about a 2-year delay between what we can read and what we can write. We have to be able to read cursive in order to be able to write cursive. And that means we have some work to do. So I went to teaching high school, and in high school we were told, we always told the students to print on your papers, because I can't read your handwriting. I need to be able to read what you've written so that I can give you a grade on it, right? We needed to be able to understand what our students were trying to tell us. I left the high school and went to teaching in 6th grade. You know what went on in 6th grade? Cursive was mandatory-ish. We were supposed to teach cursive handwriting. We were supposed to have our students write, encode in cursive. And we were supposed to model that cursive handwriting. But, you close your doors, you do your own thing sometimes. But I spent the year before I went from high school down to sixth grade, I spent my entire summer practicing writing in cursive on the board. Remember what my teachers had said to me. And they were right. My handwriting was atrocious. I had to practice. And I remember as a new sixth grade teacher, the first time I wrote in cursive on the board, and I had this beautiful lesson all written out, prepared for my students when they walked in the door. And my kids said, "What's that?" And they weren't asking, "What's that?" as in, "Why are we doing that lesson?" They asked me, "What's that?" as in, "What the heck is that stuff that's on the board?" They couldn't read it. And they couldn't read it as sixth graders because they had not been taught cursive handwriting. They had not been taught to decode it nor to encode it. So in addition to teaching all the other things I had to teach, I also took on the task of teaching my students how to decode and encode in cursive writing. It's almost as if it's a foreign language. And what I'm finding as I dug into this topic that we have a whole generation, our Gen Z students who were not taught cursive handwriting when they're getting to college, they're in social science history courses. They can't read the documents. They can't read those primary source documents. So we have teachers who are Gen Z coming out of college, out of university, and going into classrooms who've never learned to encode, write, or decode, read cursive handwriting. And so two questions. One, how do you teach history if you can't read the historical documents to get the entire context, the feel of what was happening at the time? How do you teach a subject, a skill that you don't have? So if you're an elementary teacher and you've never learned how to write in cursive handwriting, how are you going to teach your students to write in cursive? You have to learn it. You have to learn how to read it. You have to learn how to write it, and you'll have to learn how to teach it. And besides all that stuff, there's the science behind it. Cursive handwriting strengthens fine motor skills. Practice on your own. Pick up that pen. Get proper format. You can go to mycursive.com, and this is no plug for them. They don't know me. I just found them in my research. They've got lessons that you can download to work on your cursive handwriting. And what you're going to find, especially if you've not been doing a lot of handwriting, is it hurts. Our muscles, we have lost that muscle memory. Our kids are so busy with their thumbs texting and playing video games that to put thumb to forefinger and actually write is a whole other set of muscles, fine motor skills that need to be worked and strengthened and developed. In addition, working in cursive handwriting, writing in cursive handwriting is a comprehension aid for students with dyslexia because of the continuity of the script. And it stimulates key learning processes. Writing in cursive is just good stuff when it comes to our cognitive development. And in a world of AI, handwriting may be about the only way we can authenticate students' work. What's happening in your state? Find out. Check out what's going on in your schools when it comes to handwriting, teaching handwriting, and learning. And then where do you stand? Where do you stand as a parent? Where do you stand as an educator? And once you find out what's going on, get involved and stay involved. Now, if you're in a state that is anti-cursive, and if you believe it's a benefit, if you believe in the science, that it is a benefit, that it develops those fine motor skills, that it's a comprehension aid for students with dyslexia, that it stimulates learning processes, contact your state representative. And particularly, give a little bit of support and aid to Indiana Senator Jean Lysing and Michigan Representative Brenda Carter, and then vote. This is why your state and local elections matter. Now, yes, vote in the presidential election, but vote for your local and state representatives as well, and take someone else with you who might not otherwise vote. Attend those local school board meetings, advocate through social media, follow me across my channels, share, like, repost. And continue to join me every week. Connect with me on social. Use those links down in the notes. Send me your questions, topics, requests. I need content. What do you need to know? Send those to me at info@askdrberry.com, and I will answer those questions and bring you experts to help address those topics. As always, don't worry about the things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. And I'll see you next time.
That's it for today's episode of the 3E Podcast. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Dr. Berry herself. Be sure to head over to 3epodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Berry's gift. Then join us on the next episode.